The N3 highway near Mooi River Toll Plaza in KwaZulu-Natal is still closed following violent protests overnight.
Now, protesters have threatened to intensify protests in the province. Law enforcement officials have been deployed to monitor the situation.
It's been a chaotic few days in KwaZulu-Natal. Scenes of violent protests where trucks have been set alight, roads blocked.
Unrest was sparked by the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma.
Now, earlier, police said that they had dispersed a group of about 300 people who had barricaded the M2 freeway.
This is the situation. Yesterday, a number of trucks were torched. Here, police are here. The people that you see, look at them. They are still going inside the mall to.
They left us devastated. I mean, the community of Alexandra has been robbed of the community station.
And now they've gone back in. So they've gone to the left wing where the police were trying to push them from. A little earlier as well, they had fired tear gas and people moved away, but they keep going back.
The ATM here has been completely wrecked.
Across South Africa's two most populous provinces, it was mob rule for more than a week.
We're hearing rubber bullets, they're dispersing the crowd. We saw one person being arrested on the other side.
The looters came in and they just finished taking what they could.
As the community, seeing them there waiting to make their move, essentially.
In acts of public violence of a kind rarely seen in the history of our democracy.
The government is of the belief that it has actually been orchestrated.
The president maintains that the protests emanate from people with a political purpose.
To creep in, even with the soldiers out, and I mean you can see Teddy had to use a light, a big light.
All this rioting around the country, a loaf of bread has now turned into a very rare commodity in some areas.
You're seeing the live visuals now. They are currently patrolling the streets of Alexandra.
Just a short while ago, some members of the military, the SAPS, were stationed here.
We ran back to our area, mobilized our people, so that we can make sure that that area is covered.
And it's absolutely heartbreaking scenes, women with babies and children here.
The cleanup campaign to just start, cleaning up the areas.
There's been a lot of death, there's been a lot of carnage, a lot of economic damage.
Broadcasting live from the nation's capital in Tshwane. Here now, your summit host, Michael Shackleton.
For many years to come, the events of 12 to 18 July 2021 will remain in the South African psyche as a disturbing reminder of how our country can slip into total anarchy without effective and proactive leadership. The events of that week sent shockwaves across a democratic South Africa that had never experienced such levels of violence and unrest before. Mass looting and destruction of property gripped the provinces of KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, exacerbating the already fragile economic crises in the country. While we all watch the horrific and terrifying visuals of the looting and property destruction, including that of schools, hospitals, and warehouses, thousands of law-abiding South Africans immediately saw their livelihoods go up in flames. Businesses, whether small or corporate, endured profound losses and damages that could only mean the consequence of mass job losses to follow. While South Africans were reeling in the shock of the most violent period in our democratic dispensation, our government was slow to react. Any citizen from day one of the looting could see that SAPS would never be able to contain the unrest on their own. Despite calls from the DA and others to deploy the army to affected areas, this government still sat on their hands, believing that the unrest would soon end. It was only after seeing mass damage did government finally react, and the president deployed the SANDF. But another short sight by the government became evident. While the army was visible in Gauteng, residents of KZN were still left to their own devices, defending their homes and communities with no help from security forces. The rest of South Africa became gripped with fear over possible food and fuel shortages, especially those in the northern inland provinces who rely on supply from the nation's east coast. Panic buying emerged, only to have created more panic, while petrol stations were left with empty pumps. When Gauteng started to stabilize, with residents taking to the streets to commence with cleanup efforts, our fellow South Africans in KZN were still defending their homes, businesses, and communities as the army started to move in, following an additional deployment order from the president. Unfortunately, the response from our security forces were too little and too late. While government was able to confirm to the country that the looting and destruction was indeed an orchestrated campaign, with some of the lead instigators having loyal ties to former President Jacob Zuma, there was evident contradiction within cabinet of whether this was indeed an insurrection. Not only was there disagreement between the president and his Minister of Defense on the matter, but a blame game also emerged, with the Minister of Police accusing the Minister of State Security for not providing him with the intelligence that such a threat was imminent and due to take place within a few days. The insurrection of July 2021 proved many things to South Africa. Our security and intelligence services were ill-prepared and totally caught off guard. Our government did not act swiftly, and the result left communities destitute. However, one positive from that horrific week did surface. South Africans across racial lines were able to unite, opting not to wait for a slow and incompetent government to help, but started taking charge of a situation that had gotten way out of control. Ordinary law-abiding South Africans with private security companies and community policing forums got together and stood their ground within their communities. They guarded their neighborhoods, their businesses, and their malls. The lesson here is that we do not have to solely rely on government. South Africans can, with the correct information and advice, take action to protect their country and restore stability. This is the purpose of tonight's virtual Community Safety Summit, to provide South Africans with a range of expert information and advice on how to deal with an unrest such as what happened 2 weeks ago. Tonight's discussions will include an analysis of our country's security landscape, the role of SAPS, Metro Police, and private security companies, the purpose of community policing forums, and how communities can form their own, including the challenges they currently face, as well as an exclusive discussion with the Minister of Community Safety in the Western Cape, Albert Fritz, on how good governance ensures adequate preparation for when such events can occur. Tonight's summit is for you, the South African citizen, to have the adequate knowledge on the state of security in our country and what you can do to best prepare yourself for the future. First up tonight, we have Sinethemba Zonke, who is the head of the DA's research department in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. Earlier this week, the DA released a survey to residents in the province, which included questions relating to safety, security, and the recent unrest in our country. I am happy to now welcome Sinethemba to present those survey results to us and what they indicate Gauteng residents are currently thinking and feeling. Thanks, Sinethemba. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. So the survey went out to a number of respondents in the city, gathering what their perceptions are on issues of crime and public safety. There were 10 questions all in all. One of the key things that we have seen is that the respondents don't feel safe in the province. Over 80% of the respondents felt unsafe in the province, with one key result showing us that 50.92% felt very unsafe. Another key perception that we've seen is that the perception around crime is that crime is increasing, with 51.83% believing that crime had greatly increased over the past year. 28.66% felt that it had slightly increased. Again, this is a range at around 80% who believe that crime is increasing within the past year. In terms of the third question, we can see the perception that there is not much confidence and faith in the police. 57.93% of the people surveyed feel that the police are not effective at all, with 29.27% feeling that they're not so effective. This is quite a glaring perception in terms of how people feel with regards to the police in the province and how they act in preventing crime. In the 12 months, we asked the respondents if they've contacted the police. This is actually quite an interesting one when you consider that there's a feeling of unsafe, but not that many people have contacted police. It might be that
I think it indicates that they have no faith in the police, which I think is very sad. I wanted to ask you, Senator Temba, on your previous slide about how people feel about police responsiveness and they're not at all effective. Do you think if the police had responded in time and adequately during the latest violent unrest, if they had actually prevented malls from being burnt down, for example, do you think we would see a different picture here where people would have actually said that police were probably effective in their areas, even if they're looking at a view over the past 12 months even?
I think indeed that probably played a major impact on how people have perceived it. I mean, in the past, the recent riots, we saw that our police were basically non-existent. And I think that is actually just cemented the views amongst our citizens that the police aren't there to help them. And that probably also has an impact in terms of whether people feel like they can contact police for particular crimes that face. So there's not much faith within the police sector. In terms of our next question, in question 5, this again shows, or at least can come into the conversation with regards to how much do people have confidence in the police. We asked them if they've had any security purchases over the past 12 months. And we've seen that 73% of the respondents said they've made security purchases. This could be just security upgrades in their houses or even things such as protection in terms of guns. Again, this is showing that people are taking the issue of keeping themselves safe, the issue of keeping their families safe and their own security into their own hands. We asked respondents to also, out of a number, 10 issues, to pick their top 5 issues that they thought were the greatest problems within their communities. We see here that issues such as burglaries, whether it's in residential or auto, were the 2 top issues, with 89% feeling that residential burglaries were amongst the top 5 issues. The other issues are muggings, disorderly conduct, and driving under the influence. Those are the other issues that people rated as in their top 5. These are issues that could possibly be dealt with, and a low-hanging fruit that could be dealt with police presence within communities. Within our next question, we asked if people were affected, whether their property or businesses were affected with the recent riots. As we know that the riots were mostly big in KZN, and there were not that many in terms of here in Gauteng. However, there were 8.5% of people who said that they were affected by the riots, while 91.46% were not affected. When we asked people how they were affected, we got a few responses telling us about how people felt that they were unsafe. People were scared to support businesses because of the feeling that they were not safe. Some people, a person suggested that there's no project funding, and I think this has a wider view in terms of the international perception with regards to South Africa. There was no funding approved now as a result of the riots. This could have impact on future jobs if there's no more things such as FDI or investment. This could even include local investors who may feel that they do not want to risk investment into the country while we have such an issue such as riots or even the security situation. Some other people saw that staff did not come to work as we know where the riots were, where in areas like townships where working class people could not travel, whether because of issues such as public transport not being available. There was also disruption in terms of supply and delivery. So even if people are not affected in terms of their properties or their own businesses, there was an impact across the province, particularly in terms of supply. Another question that we asked was if in the past people had been affected by other riots or protests, whether their property was damaged or stolen during riots. We had a low percentage here, which is 7.36% of people who said that they were impacted, and 92.6.4% said they were not affected. The last question that we asked people was how they felt in terms of possible riots and how this would impact the business. We've got a very high feeling that they would be impacted, with 30% saying that, 30.2% saying that they would very high likely be impacted, 30.8% saying that it's likely. So I would say that it's about 60% people feeling that there's risks towards their business that will be affected by riots in the future. Those were our perceptions that we got from the 10 questions from our respondents. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Senatemba, for your efforts and for that very insightful information. I think especially looking at your last slide in conjunction with previous slides, when one looks at has your business actually been affected by the rioting and will it be affected in future? I think it certainly appears that people are living in a climate of fear, and that people aren't certain if the police would be able to protect them in Gauteng in the future should this violence recur. People in Gauteng, yeah, thank you so much. Please, sorry.
No, yes, indeed, Michael. I think that's what we have seen, and these riots have basically emphasized the lack of confidence, the lack of security that people in South Africa are feeling and in the province are feeling for years now. And just these recent riots have just hit the nail on the head in terms of what is happening.
Thank you so much again, Senator. It is quite clear from these results that Gauteng residents are indeed concerned about the state of security and safety in our province. Up next, we will have Gebrand van Heerden from the Center for Risk Analysis to give us a breakdown on the overall state of security in South Africa. But before we start that discussion, here is an update from the DA's Shadow Minister for Justice, Gunneth Breitenbach, on the criminal charges that the DA laid against Duduzile Zuma, Duduzane Zuma, Edward Zuma, and Julius Malema for their actions during the unrest.
You lodged complaints of incitement to violence against members of the Zuma family and certain political leaders during the looting. Have you heard any progress on those charges?
I actually have, yes. The police have assigned, the Hawks have assigned 2 very senior investigators who have been to see me twice. They show a great interest in this investigation. I know that they are working hard on it. They keep me reasonably updated. They've appointed very competent cyber forensic experts to help them in this investigation, and I know that they've collected a large body of data already for analysis. So they're taking it very seriously. I'm very happy with the progress they're making. And they constantly keep me in the loop. So I'm very optimistic that those charges will actually go somewhere.
Some good news.
Can I ask a follow-up question, if I may, Glynis? Nearly 2 weeks ago, we heard from the President's mouth that the government knew who the so-called instigators of this insurrection were, and that they were working on nabbing them.
Yes.
Where are they?
Well, one wonders if they're existing. If they know who they are, then why haven't they arrested them? They brought one person in for questioning and promptly let him go. So either there are no 12 instigators, or they have no idea what happened. And if we look at the ministers in charge of the security cluster, then I go with the second option. They have no idea what happened.
Joining me now is Gauteng van Heerden, who is a research analyst for the Center for Risk Analysis at the Institute of Race Relations. Gauteng will be giving us an analytical view of the state of crime and security in South Africa. Gauteng, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good evening to the audience tonight. As Michael mentioned, I'm Gauteng. I am a research analyst for the Center for Risk Analysis, or CRA for short, and the CRA is housed within the Institute of Race Relations. Now, the CRA recently conducted research and analysis on crime and security in South Africa after the riots and looting that occurred in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, because we thought that the events that happened in those two provinces really highlighted it highlighted the capacity of our state security forces. And so my session tonight will not only look at an overview of crime trends in the country, but I will also speak to the state of our police service, as well as alternative security measures in this country. So I have prepared a few slides, which I'm going to share now. All right, sorry, I'm just struggling to find my slides at the moment. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. So, can everybody see my screen? All right. So, in order to, let me just put this in presentation mode. There we go. So, in order to gauge how safe or violent a country is, we first have to look towards the murder rate. The murder rate is the number of murders per 100,000 people, and the murder rate is a very useful tool to understand how safe or how dangerous a country is. Now, that is because the murder rate, or rather murder, is internationally, the definition of murder is consistent all over the world. And secondly, murder is one of the most reported crimes in the world. So with regarding the murder rate in South Africa, this chart shows us the murder rate between the 1994-1995 period up until the 2019-2020 period. On the left-hand axis, you have cases per 100,000, and at the bottom, you have yearly trends. Now, as this graph shows us, since 1994, there have been a significant drop in the murder rate. In 1994, there were 67 murders per 100,000, and by 2011-2012, our murder rate dropped to 31 cases per 100,000, essentially halving during that period. However, that's where the good story ends, because since then, our murder rate has started to creep up steadily until where it currently stands at 36 murders per 100,000. Now, long-term trends have also shown that various other contact crime have seen significant decreases since 1994. Now, contact crime is violent contact between the perpetrator and the victim, and it includes crime categories such as murder, assault, sexual offenses, and robberies. Now, since 1994, there have been major declines in contact crime rates. For example, murder, attempted murder, and serious assault have declined on average by 50%. Now, there are two things to take note of, in fact. Firstly, these long-term declines conceal a short-term uptick in crime, as I explained with the murder rate. And secondly, some crime categories actually experienced an increase since 1994. For example, aggravated robbery increased by 12% and common robbery increased by 5%. Now, it is also important to look at crime's impact on business in South Africa. And in our research, we specifically looked at non-residential burglary or business burglary, as well as non-residential robbery or business robbery. Now, before I elaborate further, I just want to make a distinction between those two crime categories. So firstly, business burglary, the business burglary rate declined from 2002, from 163 cases in 2002 to 119 cases per 100,000 in 2019-2020. So there's an overall positive trend there with regarding business burglary. However, business robbery, on the other hand, has quadrupled since 1994. And I just want to clarify that business burglary is when there's a break into a premises when that premises is uninhabited at the time, whereas business robbery is a break-in into a premises while the employees are still present during that time. So in other words, the rise in business robberies actually tell us that our criminals are becoming more violent and more risky and more prone to break into a property while the people are still present at the time. Now, our research also found that there is a disproportional impact on small businesses in poor communities with regards to crime. So, for example, statistics from the SAPS have shown that general dealers and spaza shops are the most likely to be targeted by robbers in South Africa. And these are usually businesses that you find in townships and in informal settlements. Now, our research have also shown that there is a strong connection between economic prosperity as well as violent crime or violent protests. And I'm going to justify this by showing you this chart, which looks at violent protests as a share of all protests in comparison to GDP growth. So in GDP growth, as reflected by these red bars, has steadily declined. In 2010, our economy grew by 3%, and by 2019, our economy only grew by 0.2%. Read over that violent protest, and you can see a relationship emerging. In 2010, only 8% of all protests were violent, but by 2019, that proportion has increased to 30%. So what this chart is telling us is that as the economy declined, our protests became more violent. And I think that's essentially what happened during the riots and looting in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. What that was clearly the repercussions of an economy that has been performing poorly since 2010. And because of that, we've seen an escalation in protests. And not only that, but our protests have become more violent. We can also see the relationship between economic performance and violent protests by looking at the impact of the lockdown. So, for example, the number of violent protests due to labor-related issues doubled in 2020 in comparison to 2017. Also, the number of violent protests in the first few months of 2021 exceeded the number of violent protests in 2018. And that just shows, once again, the impact of the economic lockdown that we saw in 2020 and 2021. Now, the riots and looting didn't only show us the repercussions of a stagnant economy, but it also showed us the problem that the police has with regarding resources. And I'll use a ratio as an example. So in 1998, there were 361 police officers for apologies. There were 361 people per every police officer in 1998. But by 2020, there were 400 people for every police officer. What that means is that the number of police officers in South Africa did not keep pace with South Africa's growing population. So in relation to the population, we actually have fewer police officers now to keep the population safe in comparison to 1998. Now, the fact that the police have problems with resources, that's not the only problem that they're dealing with. There's also elements of criminality within the police. And I can justify this by bringing up data from the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, or IPID. Now, that data showed that in 2019, 2020 alone, there were 5,600 complaints and notifications against SAPS members. The majority of these complaints and notifications against SAPS members centered around torture and assault. But many of these complaints and notifications also included incidents of corruption, rape by a police officer, sexual or domestic violence by a police officer, as well as deaths in police custody. So the constrained resources that the police are dealing with, as well as some criminal elements in parts of the police service, have really dealt a blow to the public's perception of the South African police service. And we can clearly see this by looking at this chart, which shows us the change in the number of households reporting a crime to the police. So, for example, I'll use housebreaking as an example. If you look at the bottom left of this chart, since 2010, the number of households that reported or rather the number of households that experienced a housebreaking and that reported that incident of housebreaking to the police declined by 14% since 2010. Expressed differently, in 2010, the proportion of households that experienced a housebreaking and that reported that housebreaking to the police stood at 60% compared to 50% in the 2019-2020 period. So that means that households are starting to lose confidence in our police to such an extent that they are actually not making an effort to report a crime to the police. Now, of course, as households lose confidence in the police, they will start to look for alternative security measures. And that's where private security comes in. So once again, I'll use a ratio as an example. We have the ratio for people per police officer as shown here by these red bars, but then I'll add the number of people per private security officer as shown in these orange bars. Now, in 1998, there were 320 people per private security officer. And by 2020, that figure has dropped to 107 people per private security officer. So what that means is that there has been an exponential growth in private security officers. Also, private security businesses, the number of private security businesses since 1998 have grown by 120%. And that demonstrates that there's a huge demand for private security in the country. However, of course, private security comes as a price, at a price, and it's often a price that poor communities cannot afford. And that's why we see a high level of incidents of vigilantism and mob justice in South Africa. In fact, in the 2019-2020 period alone, there were more than 1,200 murders that occurred due to vigilantism and almost 2,000 serious assaults that have occurred because of vigilantism and mob justice. So to conclude, I want you to walk away with four key points. Firstly, yes, South Africa has made progress in reducing overall crime trends in the long term. However, there is an uptick in crime in the short term. Secondly, there is a clear relationship between economic prosperity and violent crime. Thirdly, businesses will continue to be impacted by crime in South Africa, especially businesses in poor communities such as townships and informal settlements. And lastly, crime is going to continue to impact South Africa's image as an investment destination. So not only should we reduce, or not only should we improve the economy to reduce crime, but we should also reduce crime in order to attract investment and improve the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that great presentation, Gerbrand. Now that it has been almost a month since the unrest that gripped the country, it's quite important for us all to sit down and critically analyze the state we currently find ourselves in, which is what you helped do for us now. It is only from there that we can then start thinking of tangible solutions that can prevent such unrest from happening again. Before I let you go, we just have one question for you from an audience member on our Zoom platform.
Hi, Gerbrand. So considering how slow government was to react to the looting, are they capable of preventing any future unrest in the short term, or is that an impossible dream?
Firstly, I think I'll answer that by saying that the government was clearly caught by surprise when the riots and looting happened. We also saw that it took them a while to really get their ducks in a row, to organize a sufficient number of police members to the areas of concern. But not only have they been slow to deploy resources, but also we're going to see these riots and looting occur again in the future, especially at the scale that we saw in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. This is because the government is unwilling to implement the type of economic reforms that will put this country back on track in terms of economic growth and investment. And as I've explained earlier, we need to increase our economic growth in order to create job opportunities and to reduce poverty levels. And if the government is not serious about implementing reforms, which I suspect they're not serious, then our country will continue to stagnate economically. And unfortunately, we are going to see poverty levels and unemployment levels continue to rise, and therefore growing frustration and an escalation in violent protests.
Thank you for that, Gerbrand, and thank you for coming onto the show tonight.
Thank you so much.
While government was found wanting during a time when South Africans and their neighborhoods and communities were in serious danger, private security companies took up the task of uniting with residents to do the job that SAPS was supposed to do. Together with residents, private security companies coordinated and commenced with operations to protect any infrastructure that was at risk. Our next guest is Henny Swanepoel, who is from BizSec, a Centurion-based community safety organization that works closely with many private security companies as well as SAPS. He is here tonight to talk to us about the role of private security companies and what exactly they do. Henny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael.
Let's first start off with understanding the general role of private security. How would you explain that to someone who has no knowledge of private security and what exactly your organization, BizSec, offers?
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, about 3 years ago, we decided and started developing a virtual or a mobile platform. So we did a platform where you have a mobile panic app that you can press, and that it sends your location so that we can react very, very fast. So from that, we went further to have these information locations sent via a telegram, and then from there to responders. Now, the normal thing would be that somebody would call in or phone on a cell phone or radio, and then we struggle to find location. Sometimes you would get an ambulance that needs to go out, and the question is, what is the location? What is the nearest street corners? Struggling with spelling and so on. So using the emergency app does away with all that, and so response is then much, much faster. Okay, so 3 years ago, we just started working in a relationship with the police, building a relationship with them so that they could assist security companies in the when they respond. Okay, also meeting continuously with various security companies and building this platform that we started first on a Zello platform, which is a mobile app on the cell phones, and went over to radio, the PTT 4G radios that is now used. We turned about 2 months ago on 240 odd armed response working together in the Pretoria area.
Wonderful. 240 sounds like a great number. Considering
great number. Sorry, 4 months, 300 arrests was made.
Well done. That's
yes,
really working hand in hand to ensure the safety of your community.
That's correct.
Considering the magnitude of the unrest that the country experienced at the time, what exact role did private security companies play in helping to clamp down on the looting and property destruction?
Mike, I can only speak for what we experienced in Centurion area. When the news came through of the looting in the other Atteridgeville and Olivenhoutbosch, some of the security companies had clients in those areas. They deployed their people in there, and it almost turned into a disaster as these guys were, one or two people in an area with hundreds of people looting. But still, during that first evening, we deployed quite a few security vehicles on the R55 and the highway entrances towards Centurion. And I think that definitely blocked any ideas from people getting through that wanted to move into Centurion. We started patrolling every single mall every few hours to see if anything was going on, and thus kept the area safe.
Thank you. What is the current working relationship between SAPS and private security companies? And what are the challenges hampering a better working partnership?
Yeah, what always happens, Mike, is a sort of a jealousy thing seems to come in when, as soon as you have success on one group. We've had this for years in the private community safety groups, that somebody else will always try and start a small little group, and then you have 5 guys in that group and 10 guys in a new group. So the whole idea that we have here is to have one platform where you have, for instance, the whole of Tshwane, all the police stations, all the security companies and community safety on one platform, communicating with each other as something happens. So information would come in, and somebody would say they're robbing, there's a robbery at this address. And then all these people working together can react and respond to that. So now you have 5, 10, 15 security companies responding. You have the tracker sometimes uses their helicopter for us, the police chopper is in the air. And so we've had scenes where you have up to 40, 50 vehicles there apprehending suspects. So the idea would be one platform that is controlled but not kept away from other players in the game.
Thank you, Henny.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you very much. What can government do to help ease the job of private security companies?
I think from the police side, I would. There is a working relationship now being built between the police and security companies on the E2 platform, which they call the eyes and ears. So companies that's on that platform are then linked by radio directly with the OCC of the police to dispatch vehicles faster. But we still have the problem, of course, with not having enough police to react, taking too long to get to complaints. Most of the, not arrests, but detainments are being done by security personnel and even neighborhood watch people that has to detain and wait an hour or 2 hours for the police to come. So the relationship, I would say, between public and police is not in a good place, definitely. The government will have to change the attitude of police officers, where you walk into a charge office and a member of the public is treated like a criminal when they walk into a police charge office, and you're just there to have something signed or an affidavit done. And it's like, what the heck are you doing here? They don't even want to stand up. We've experienced this really badly a few months ago with a gentleman who went to buy milk for his baby and was arrested on the curfew. I was actually personally involved in that case. Coming to the police station 6 o'clock in the morning and being told, please, you're not welcome here, come back at 10 o'clock. And so, yeah, we need to change that. The police, I think an administrative side for police that is trying to work with the public, and then the other units to do the crime side. But we need a softer approach in police stations. And then also TMPD, if we can get police and TMPD to work together, then that will assist a lot. We've from our side, we've got a few people from TMPD assisting us and the National Traffic Police that we can call and get help from them. But as far as I've seen, there's not a great relationship between police and TMPD, and not a great relationship between police and the community. I think the community should be, we should know our police officers by name, and they should be serving, patrolling the community, meeting the community members like in the old days. The local policeman was known, and the old Tannies brought cake and stuff to the police today. They don't want. So for us as community safety organizations, we rely on funds from the community. So we don't get funds from anywhere else. So if government could set up a system to fund these community projects, and of course to train a community, like neighborhood watchers, proper training and certification, like we have in I think the Western Cape, where they have proper training for neighborhood watchers. Actually, very strong neighborhood watchers in the Cape. Tshwane, we don't really have neighborhood watchers, but CPFs are ruling mostly. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Henny, for your great insights. We do have a question for you from one of our audience members on the Zoom platform.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, Henny. So the question is, considering that we saw community members work hand in hand with private security companies during the unrest, how can residents get involved now with private security companies to best prepare themselves for any potential unrest in the future?
Yeah, we've actually had a discussion yesterday. We had a robbery at our Pick n Pay in the Doornkloof area, and the discussion was, what do you do in a case like that? Do you try to arrest these guys while the action is at the mall, or what do you do? So the strategy that we follow is that we need to get the residents away from that area as fast as possible. If we can follow the perpetrators, then arrests must be made outside the mall. No weapons or firearms used inside the mall to keep the public safe. So we've got the radios in our area, about 600 radios, where the community communicates with each other. So information flows fairly fast. So when there's a problem, we can get the community to act quickly, but only as eyes and ears. And we have one response team that will now, use bulletproofs and firearms if necessary. But we always have a security backup from security companies, armed response, and then the police to assist in those matters.
Thank you so much, Henny, for joining us this evening and for providing us with your sharp insights into the work of private security companies and what they do to help keep our communities safe. Up next, we will have representatives from 3 community policing forums across Gauteng for a roundtable discussion on the work they do to help keep their neighborhoods safe. But first, here is a case study of what the DA-led city of Cape Town has done to make Bontohevel safer.
So right now we're literally in the center of Cape Town in a community called Bontohevel. We are about 85,000 people that live in this area. Bontohevel had a very, very high murder rate because of our lack of policing in the area. On a daily basis, we were losing people to gang violence.
We were infected and inflicted with gang violence.
Our kids couldn't even play in peace in the park. I was actually very scared even to leave my home. Constantly, I will say constantly living in fear. For a city or a government to be effective in fighting crime, you need around 1 police officer for every 220 members of the public. At the moment, Cape Town, in terms of SAPS resources, is sitting around 1 to every 560. The LEAP program by the city and the province is an attempt to compensate for those very low SAPS deployment figures in those areas where it matters most. In the 10 most affected crime hotspots, we are deploying 100 officers each with the goal of halving the murder rate, seriously improving the safety, and thereby allowing investment, job creation, and the normalization of community life in those areas.
LEAP's brought about high levels of law enforcement visibility in the area. Where there was no visibility, we now have visibility at key times.
Before we had this program, there were days when I dreaded even getting up.
but afterwards I felt safe because, you know, I could be walking down the street or crossing the road or down Bontiville Avenue, and I would see 5 law enforcement vehicles in that time just passing me by, which made me feel safer.
What we need to do here is be visible, to patrol, to build relationships with communities, to act on tip-offs, to be responsive, to attend to hotspots.
We set up street WhatsApp groups in every single street of this community. So whenever there were issues, whenever things went wrong, whenever there was a problem, we were able to immediately report these issues through.
Look where we're standing today. We're standing here. We walked all the way from the center. We weren't robbed. We weren't accosted. Nothing happened to us. Here's young people out, here's old people out. We joggers past us.
So LEAP is not just about 100 law enforcement officers coming to an area. LEAP is about bringing communities together. LEAP's about building relationships where relationships were broken before.
None of this would have been possible if it hadn't to be for LEAP and the law enforcement officers.
So we need to see more local community leaders engaging the program, understanding the program, and being able to communicate with community and the officers to ensure that the programs actually become successful.
Welcome back to the Gauteng Community Safety Summit. On the show with us now are representatives from 3 different community policing forums across Gauteng. From the Brixton CPF in Johannesburg, we have Mohammed Abdul Azim. From the Littleton CPF in Centurion, we have James Manners-Wood. And from the Vaal CPF, we have Ivan Parks. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Michael.
Thank you. It really is a privilege to have all of you with us here tonight, and also to have engaged with you personally.
Thank you very much, Michael.
It's honestly been a pleasure to be able to say that I've met all of you personally, one-on-one in your work, playing the role that you do in your CPFs across Gauteng, committed to your local communities day after day, night after night, with a little hope for any reward, really, you know, being a selfless crime fighters and community leaders. I think for many people watching the summit, they would be interested to hear from you what exactly is the role of CPFs, how are CPFs formed, but also what challenges are you facing as CPFs, especially when it comes to rural and township crime. How could CPFs be more capacitated and better resourced? And the working relationship that you have between CPFs and SAPS, and perhaps even what SAPS can do further to help CPFs. I know that is a bit of a mouthful, but I know that you guys do this thing day to day, moment to moment. So please fire away, James, Mohammed, Ivan, whoever feels most comfortable. How can people join their local CPFs, and what kind of challenges are you facing?
Okay, Michael, if I could start off there.
Sure.
Okay, we have in our area, we have what we call community patrollers and a lot of neighborhood watchers who all work together. We recently used to be called the community police, and we're using a police badge, which became a huge problem. We were doing that since 2008, working closely with the police. Then just this last year, I think I discussed it with you, they decided that we must get rid of the police badge, which was not a problem. We got rid of it. Midvaal helped us to change over our whole system, and we are now known as the community patrollers for the De Deer precinct area. Anybody can join. But what I'd like to actually bring up here is the neighborhood watchers. The neighborhood watchers are not recognized. The Minister of Police recently said, thank you for the security companies helping the SAPS. And there was no mention of the CPFs or the neighborhood watches. And I feel that the CPFs and the neighborhood watches must get more recognition. Neighborhood watches are not registered anywhere in Gauteng. And I feel we should have a board or something where neighborhood watches can be registered. I can give you a small example of our community patrollers, which was started in 2008 by a Colonel Slubbert in the Didier precinct. It's exactly what the community in blue policing is now. That's what we were doing in 2008 already. I'll just give you a small example of how important it is. We also part of RIMS, Road Incident Management Services, and they have trained many of our members. We do a lot of accidents in our area, and we report in on those accidents. And our guys have been told that our reports sometimes supersede the police reports. So I really feel that neighborhood watches, CPFs need far more recognition than what they're getting. Let me give the other guys a chance to talk on this.
Thank you very much, Ivan. I certainly agree with you. And later on in the summit, we'll also be discussing how in the Western Cape, where the DA governs, neighborhood watches are accredited, and we are proposing a community safety oversight bill here in Gauteng, which will definitely provide for the accreditation of neighborhood watches. I'd like to ask James, can you please elaborate for us on what is the role of CPFs?
Good evening, everyone. The role of the CPF per se is to be the eyes and ears of SAPS. So if you notice anything untoward happening in your precinct area, that you then report it via your sector manager or directly to your VISPOL commander at the station, what is actually going on. But going back to what Ivan had to say earlier, I find it quite intriguing that they were told to take away the SAPS badge off of their CPF logo. Since when has that come about? Because we still operate with it in Pretoria. No memo has come across to say that we're not allowed to.
Thank you for that, James. But perhaps that's a discussion that you can have offline as well. Although Ivan did actually supply me with the official documents from province instructing them to do so, and they duly remedied it. But I think that is something we can discuss offline, and maybe even take it up through the department to get a sort of uniform approach. But I know that you're always willing to help, James.
Now, going back to your question about what do we actually do, we're the eyes and ears. In my specific suburb, we've got currently about 86 active patrollers that are actually watching the neighborhood for us in conjunction with the security companies, and we work very well together with a joint operations center where everything is reported to, and then from there it is filtered back through to SAPS and all the relevant people.
Awesome. Mohammed, I hope you're still able to hear us clearly.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Can you please elaborate for us? What are some of the challenges that you're facing as the CPF there in Brixton?
The challenges we face, our sector managers don't come out with us. We don't get support from our station. When we're faced with suspects and we bring them to the station, the guys are sitting behind the counter, and then within a day or two, these same suspects are coming out. They then released. The other challenges we face in here is that are we allowed to carry firearms, or are we not allowed to carry firearms? All of us we do have permits. The thing is that we just not getting the SAPS recognition on our side. We're just not getting their support.
Thank you so much. I've also written to the Brixton SAPS, as you know, on more than one occasion, and I'll definitely keep pushing from the side of the Gauteng province to ensure that you do get the support that you need and the support that you deserve. I'm very aware of the work that you do, And I'm not just saying this to score points. I'm very aware that your CPF is acting in a very, very selfless manner day after day with very few resources and very little recognition. Ivan, I'd like to go back to you, looking at the composition of Midvaal and the type of area which your CPF oversees. We know that some of our other CPF chairs on the call might be covering more urban areas, such as, for example, Centurion. But they're in the Vaal. Do you have particular rural challenges that your CPF uniquely faces?
Yes, Michael, we have a huge rural area. We got farms, small holdings, informal settlements, and Midvaal itself, which is sort of a town. So it's a lot of rural areas, which I'd also just like to bring in what they've mentioned there about the police. We have the full assistance from the management of the police. But unfortunately, when it comes to the day-to-day running, we have exactly the same problems. Just today, we had a problem of an accident where we waited for 3.5 hours for a police vehicle to come out. After we've spoken to the police management, then we get something done, which I find is so wrong because not everybody's got access to the police management. So, yeah, it's rural. We have a huge radio system because of the distances that we're all apart. I mean, from my place to the next door neighbor could be 2 kilometers. So all over the Midvaal, we have our own radio system. We have repeaters, and we've got about 400 radios running in this area. So it's actually a very, very organized CPF.
Thank you. Yes, please, James.
Agreeing with Ivan, I agree with you, not tend to agree with you. I do agree with you that the response time and basically the commitment from SAPS, there's lackluster, I think, across the province. You can phone in and wait for up to 3 hours before somebody comes out. And unless you phone the brigadier of the station, they technically don't bother much or give feedback. Or you can phone 10111 incident I had over the weekend. And the message you got after hanging on for 15 minutes is that the system is now down and offline. So what does one do then if the infrastructure of SAPS is actually broken when it comes to communication? We've also got repeaters and radios, hence why we do function, and the other connections we've got. But we've got to try and figure out how to get the response down to what it should be.
Absolutely. I think as a follow-up question to you, James, can the relationship between SAPS and CPF improve? And if the answer is yes, how?
I will say to you, yes, it can improve. I've seen it happen in my own station with literally interpersonal relationships with station command, Vispol commanders, and all the rest of it. But unfortunately, I do believe that there are still, how would one put this politely, bad elements that it's maybe just a job. They're not passionate about what they do. They go there, clock in and clock out, and if they can do as little as possible, they will do that. They don't necessarily go out of their way to serve and protect, as the motto of SAPS is.
Absolutely. Mohammed, yeah, that's very, very unfortunate. I think SAPS does require critical reform. And coming up next, after you guys, we'll have, thankfully, the DA Shadow Minister of Police for the whole country, Andrew Whitfield, who I think will also give us some guidance into how SAPS is able to reform. Mohammed, you mentioned that there is a critical lack of support from SAPS to the Brixton CPF. Can you maybe elaborate on that further, and maybe how your CPF could get enough support?
We have a sector manager that has been allocated to us. Whenever we go out on patrols, we do go to the station. We do put in our OB numbers, and every time when we go and put in our OB numbers, we always notify our sector manager 2 days prior to our patrols. Not once has our sector manager come out. Not once has SAPS come out. We had to get SAPS from Joburg Central to come and help us. We had to get SAPS JMPD from Joburg Central to come and help us. So we got in Brixton. I don't know is it if it's the station itself that doesn't like the CPF, or I don't know if there's friction between the two, but we have a good relationship with the CPF and the whole community members. So the whole community itself, they know very well. They've actually stopped phoning SAPS. That's the level that it's reached now. That they've actually stopped phoning SAPS. They now actually just phone us, because our response time is about between 3 and 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. It is exceptionally appalling, I think, that people that are not even paid to do police and security work are there on the scene. I mean, it's essentially people with less, training, far less resources than what the police should have arrive on the scene in time. Ivan, please proceed.
Michael, yeah, we've had certain accidents where we need, all the other role players to come, and our guys have sat there for 8 hours, and then then I phone the City Bank General, because I've got a relationship with them as well, and that's the only time we get a response. So exactly what Aziz is saying is what we're all suffering with. The man in the street doesn't have access to those brigadiers, generals, colonels, which we have because we're working with them. So it's a big problem that we're having.
Absolutely. The last question from my side, gentlemen, maybe you all feel free answering or not. I'd like to find out from you, what is your relationship between the CPF and neighborhood watches?
Okay, I could come in there with the CPF. Michael?
Sure, yes, please.
I find the CPFs in any of our local station is more like a CPF. It's called the CPF Forum. And that's basically what they are. They're a chat show. The CPFs don't actually get out and do the work. You get your CPF patrollers, which are actually doing the work. But I was sitting in CPF meetings, and I was actually the secretary a couple of years ago. And all I did every year is just change the date on the minutes, because nothing was ever happening in the CPF meetings. But the people outside on the street are doing the work.
Thank you. Well, thank you, gentlemen, to all of you for that excellent and yes, please. James.
Okay, I agree with you, Ivan, that the patrollers are the ones doing it, but the executives that sit at station level, sometimes I think they think it's a glorified tea party or something, or what actually happens, you end up with a specific situation where, like for argument's sake, in Littleton, we've actually got 4 suburbs, which are subsectors, as well as rural. So I can understand your predicament when coming to farms and plots and all the rest of it. I border onto the rural myself, so we assist them many times when they have incidents because they don't have the manpower to get out there. Fortunately, our suburb is strong enough to be able to do that, but the executive sometimes falls very short of actually assisting the actual subsectors or the CPF patrollers, for lack of a better word, that are actually the boots on the ground.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that.
Michael,
I
think we all have our same problems. And I feel maybe we should all get together sometime and have a private meeting.
It sounds like a brilliant idea, Ivan.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant idea.
Yeah, definitely would be. I'm sure we'll talk offline as well to exchange contact details. But thank you, gentlemen, for that excellent, engaging, and insightful discussion. I think you've not only given clarity in your group of our CPF chairs, and here it's already resulted in an offer to meet with one another, but also to the viewers this evening, understanding more about what CPFs do and what you've been doing on a daily basis. Before we wrap
Michael?
up the segment, yes, sir.
Sorry, man. I just want to just a minute of your time. What we've done now in Brixton with the CPF guys, we're now buying ourselves our own fire engine, kind of thing, right? Because fire engines, it doesn't exist here basically in our precinct. We also heading now towards an ambulance now as well. We also gone into civic water and lights, so we're helping out with that also. So the whole structure of CPF doesn't just mean you're patrolling. So we're now dealing with illegal connections, overcrowding of houses, sewages. So basically everything to do with the whole community is what we basically getting ourselves involved with.
Aziz, I think you and I sit on the same page there as well as Ivan. We get involved where we need to be involved purely due to the fact that service delivery or infrastructure is not functional.
Yes, 100%, 100%.
Big time. Aziz, you mentioned that there's clearly a lack of support from SAPS. You asked them in Brixton, can they come out? You wait until you become a skeleton. In essence.
Yes. Yeah, basically.
Do you have a relationship with private security companies in the area that maybe if you phone them, are they on hand to maybe accost instigators of violence, for example?
Yeah. Our backup, 99% of our backup is private security companies. So and then about 2 or 3 hours later, and then SAPS arrive. The whole crime is finished. We've already got the suspects apprehended. We're now dealing with the CCTV footage. So.
No, well, that is an absolutely shocking state of affairs. But I'm certainly glad, as a South African, and as someone that has some insight into your community, that you exist, and for the work that all three of you do. In fact, before we wrap up this section,
sorry.
No, I was going to cross over to an audience member question that wanted to ask something, but please ask Ivan, and then we'll jump straight into the next to the audience member.
Michael, what I could also come in there quickly to tell you what helps. The Midval has trained, we've got about 20 peace officers, which also assist with, if the police aren't available, they can assist with arrests. And, so we've got about 20 peace officers trained by the Midval to assist us in our crime fighting as well.
That's completely wonderful. I imagine when you say trained by the Midval, that's their local municipality, which is DA governed, which is the best governed municipality in Gauteng. We're talking about the same one.
Exactly. Yes.
Incredible. It's marvelous. Midval is really, really on the ball. Right, let's cross over to the audience member on the platform who'd like to ask a question. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Michael, and I'm going to have a quick question there for you. My question is, can the average citizen join a CPF in their community? And if so, how can they go about doing it? And again, what if there is no CPF in their community? Can they be in a position maybe, or is there a route they can follow in forming one? So if I can get an answer there, I will really appreciate it. Thank you, Michael.
Gentlemen, whoever feels free to respond, please go ahead.
Okay, Michael, I can respond to that one. We actually advertise throughout our area, telling people anybody can join our CPF. It doesn't matter what, you can be housebound, you can be in a wheelchair, anybody. We've actually got one wheelchair guy that actually goes out on patrols with us and does certain things, helps us out on radios. So anybody can join a CPF, and we ourselves offer a training for these people. Thank you, Ayanda.
Going to your question, Ayanda. Anyone who lives in an area where there is a police precinct has a VISPOL section. If you live in that area, you automatically are a member. You don't have to join up as such, but if you want to become active as a patroller or whatever, you can then approach them or the actual executive of the area of the CPF that you live in. But by constitutional of the CPF, you are automatically a member of the CPF. If there isn't one in your area because, for argument's sake, there weren't enough people around or nobody really knew about it, go in and see your VISPOL commander in the station, and he can assist you in either starting it up or show you the ropes of where and how.
Thank you so much, James. Mohammed, do you have any last comments you want to make on this question?
Yeah, we do send messages out as well for members to be joining. But what you do, we take non-vetted members onto another group, and then guys who've been out for maybe more than 6 weeks, we then give them the forms to sign and to fill in, so that the forms can be handed in to the station, and then they can be vetted.
Thank you so much. I belong to my local CPF, and I would encourage anyone interested to make attempts to also join their local CPF if you feel safe to do so, if you do have the time and willingness to do so. We have certainly seen the impact that CPFs make. Thank you, gentlemen, once again for coming onto the show, for your selflessness, for your commitment to your communities and to your fellow South Africans. Up next, we will have the DA's Shadow Minister for Police, Andrew Whitfield, who will give us a breakdown on the current states of SAPS and their response to the unrest just a few weeks ago. Thank you, gentlemen. Welcome back to the DA's Gauteng Community Safety Summit. It has been a great program so far, with so much valuable information shared from our various guests. But it is not over just yet. With me is the DA's Shadow Minister of Police, Andrew Whitfield, who was here to chat to us about SAPS and the role they played during the unrest. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Let's first kick off during the time of the looting and property destruction in Gauteng and KZN. I think the first question every South African still hasn't got a clear answer to, and that is simply, where were the police and why were they so slow to respond?
Thanks for having me, Michael. It's great to be here. And, it is absolutely the burning question that we still don't have an answer to. SAPS completely failed to preempt the looting, the wanton violence and rioting across KZN, which then, as you know very well, spread into Gauteng and caused massive devastation to economic infrastructure and to the lives and livelihoods of ordinary South Africans. And at the heart of SAPS's failure to preempt this violence is a complete failure of their intelligence capability, as well as the State Security Agency, to provide timeous and comprehensive intelligence that has been properly analyzed to preempt what was actually a well-planned and coordinated attack on the state in many respects. And then obviously a lot of opportunistic criminality which emanated from that, inevitably, given our socioeconomic status. So SAPS failed to anticipate something that had been planned, in my view, for a number of weeks and certainly months, possibly in the lead up to Jacob Zuma's arrest, and then obviously the events following that. So an entirely predictable event which went unpredicted and unanticipated by SAPS allegedly, or was the intelligence simply ignored? And these are the questions that we're busy trying to get to the bottom of.
Thank you, Andrew. What would you say is the role of SAPS during an unrest, such as the unrest which took place? What do you think SAPS should have done? And has this exposed critical challenges within SAPS? And honestly, can these actions be remedied in the short term, or do we need drastic reform of SAPS that could only be effected maybe over the next couple of years?
Well, I always want to start with the constitutional mandate of SAPS, and I think that's where we should start. And their mandate is to prevent, combat, and investigate crime. That's the first element. Then to maintain public order, which is the second part. And thirdly, to protect and secure the inhabitants of the Republic and their property. And lastly, to uphold and enforce the law. And on every measure, they have failed. They have failed not only during the unrest, but citizens will experience the failures of SAPS on a daily basis. And I always make the point, Michael, that there are some very hardworking professional police officers who are highly trained to do their jobs, and they do the best that they can. But unfortunately, the system is so endemically corrupt and polluted by politics that even the best police officers have one hand tied behind their backs while they're going out trying to do their job. And in KZN, what we saw was a severe lack of resources, a huge resource constraints in terms of public order policing, rubber bullets, live ammunition, firearms available at police stations, and just basic operational issues such as threat levels being increased at police stations in order to enable police officers to respond and react with force simply weren't activated. And so the system of the South African Police Service is completely crippled, it's crumbling. And the National Police Commissioner, as I'm sure you will know, as you pay keen interest and keen attention to these issues, had admitted in 2018 that in terms of the National Crime Prevention Strategy, SAPS cannot fulfill its constitutional mandate. Last week in the Portfolio Committee on Police, the National Police Commissioner again confessed that SAPS is failing to meet its constitutional mandate. Now, the easy political exit from this is, oh, well, there's a lack of budget and, lack of police officers. Well, it's not just about the lack of budget and lack of police officers. Of course, we need more budget, but the budget needs to be spent properly. We need to cut the number of generals we have from 200 down to less than 100. We don't have enough boots on the ground, Michael, and this is the problem. So we do need a complete overhaul of the South African Police Service. Its mandate needs to be revised, and it needs to be equipped with the right people, the right training, and the right resources in order to carry out its function in one of the most violent societies in the world.
Absolutely. What would you say are the current challenges facing SAPS in curbing everyday crime?
Well, I mean, in Gauteng, for example, your flying squad has got no vehicles, really. I mean, you don't have helicopters in the sky. You don't have tactical response units operational in order to respond to crime. Call centers don't often take calls. Call centers are down. People are not doing their job in the call centers in order to connect, crisis complaints to the right people to respond in time. So basic issues like responding to crime. Many police officers tell me that they just, the vehicles are in for repair and they don't have the right vehicles, they don't have fuel, they don't have contracts in place for maintenance of their vehicles. Whatever the case is, the system, as I said, is so crippled that the basic functions of policing are falling apart. And you can walk into any police station in the country and get an indication, Michael, of what kind of a station commander you're dealing with. You walk into a police station in one place and you might find a clean, professional, friendly, service-oriented police station, and in another, a totally different story with people sleeping behind the counter safes unlocked where firearms can be stolen, just a bad attitude to the public in general, which breaks down the trust that is so important in our social compact between citizens and the state, that the police are actually the key role player in dismantling that trust in our social compact. And so it really is completely devastating. And unfortunately, the most common experience is that of dysfunctional police stations across the country. And as we exposed in 2019, you know the whole story of the rape kit shortage, just basic consumables that should be available for our citizens to keep them safe and to make sure that they get the justice they deserve.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We've certainly been tracking resource shortages in SAPS that you've exposed in various scandals, such as the rape kit shortage that was 1.5 million rounds of ammunition stolen in KZN, and I think the whole country, including myself. I want to know where the hell are those bullets and who is going to use them and on who, and if the police are firing rubber bullets at those bullets, really how effective is that going to be? But I guess all of that directs us towards one thing, and that is, Andrew, what are the DA's proposals for what the SAPS should implement now in order to avoid the unrest that we saw from repeating itself again?
Well, we'll see what happens, but I think that the president needs to make some big calls about what kind of policing he wants to see in South Africa. He is the commander-in-chief of our security establishment. He appoints the National Police Commissioner. The National Police Commissioner is responsible for running the South African Police Service. And so just to start at the very top of SAPS, what you have in Minister Bheki Cele is a former police commissioner who now still thinks he's a police commissioner, and you've got this tussle for power at the head of SAPS between the political wing of the department and the operational or administrative wing. And as you know, in politics, it's very important to keep the administration and the politics separate, like train tracks, connected, but moving in the same direction, but separated in order not to allow any contamination. And so what needs to happen is a change in the minister's powers. I believe the minister should not have the kind of powers that they do have in South Africa. I believe that we need a professional and highly trained National Police Commissioner with years of service experience, who is not purely appointed on a political basis, but is also appointed through a very clear set out parliamentary process with clear recommendations from Parliament to the president to make sure that there is some oversight over that process. And that's at a very high level. But I think at a fundamental level on the ground, for our boots on the ground, what we need is proper training. And for the longest time, the South African Police Service have not received proper training. So we believe that we need a highly trained, professional, service-oriented police service, which is community-focused and which partners with civil society, private security firms, right, neighborhood watches, and CPFs, and works in if I can call it a security or safety and security ecosystem, where the partnerships are what keep us safer than any one entity on its own can do. And we saw that in KZN and Gauteng, how communities rallied together at the Maponya Mall, at the Jabulani Mall, at various places in Gauteng, and then across KZN, CPFs and neighborhood watches working together within their separate mandates, the police relying on citizens and private security to assist them. And all of this can happen in a regulated environment that encourages partnership in order to keep our communities safe. Unfortunately, there's a piece of legislation that's now coming to Parliament, I think in August, which is the SAPS Amendment Bill, which seeks to make life very difficult for our neighborhood watchers and even to usurp some of the municipal powers for law enforcement officers into the line of sight, if I can put it that way, of the National Police Commissioner and the Minister to create a single police service, which would be absolutely devastating. And what the DA really wants to see is to take policing down to a provincial level where you have a capable provincial government to give that provincial government the responsibility of policing, to bring our policing closer to the people so that there is clearer accountability between the government that serves the people on the ground and the police service that is designed to keep them safe. So we want to devolve it, not centralize it. And that's the key difference between the DA and the ANC. They want their hands on everything centralized in Pretoria, and we want to give power to the people to keep themselves safe and to ensure that government is accountable to the people on the ground as closely as possible.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We will certainly have to fight that bill tooth and nail. I think apart from police inadequacies, there was an article released recently from the Institute of Security Studies that indicates a national plan to actually decrease the number of SAPS officers over the next 3 years. And I think in light of the violent unrest that we saw, that seems to be completely untenable and unsustainable. But there's also another bill that you're busy fighting that I'd like to ask you about, and I think our audience would love to hear about as well. Because again, coming back to the violent unrest, we did see what happens when people unite who are responsible firearm owners. I don't think anyone's advocating for people that are not properly trained or people that have access to firearms illegally or advocating some sort of massacre. But we did see people acting with their given a right to self-defense, acting appropriately, standing in their communities to protect their loved ones and their fellow South Africans. So the last question from my side, Andrew, can you please tell us the current status of the Firearm Control Amendment Bill and what the DA has done so far to fight this bill?
Absolutely. I just want to quickly, I mean, you touched on such an important point, which is what really creates the vulnerability in our communities, and that's the lack of boots on the ground and the removal of personnel from SAPS over a period of time. I mean, over the last 2 years, they've already lost, I think, 7,000 or 8,000, and over the next 3 years, the balance. So it's only over 20,000 SAPS members who are going to lose their jobs due to budget constraints and cuts. The SAPS budget was cut by 3.9 billion rand, as you know. The visible policing took about 95% of the hit of that 3.9 billion rand, crime prevention, crime detection, etc. And so there really is a major crisis. It is unconscionable. But what makes it even more unconscionable is that SAPS has admitted that it cannot fulfill its constitutional mandate to keep the citizens safe and their property. As I told you in the constitutional mandate, it's very clearly set out. They've admitted that they cannot uphold that mandate and fulfill it. They cannot fund the police. In fact, they're actively defunding the police in our country at the moment. They're cutting police resources and personnel. And now they bring the Firearms Control Amendment Bill that says, you know, we're going to remove the one, weapon that is probably most effective in a scenario where you need to defend yourself and your family and your property. We're going to remove that, and you'll have to rely on the state. And the state will have a monopoly on violence to protect its citizens. Now, in a capable state, that is true. In the philosophy of state, the state has a monopoly on violence to protect its citizens, its borders, etc. But in an incapable state, where the SAPS is failing to fulfill its constitutional mandate, it is unconscionable to now take people's firearms away for the reason of self-defense. So they want to remove the reason within the current act to possess a firearm for self-defense, amongst other limitations on firearm owners, which will have significant economic impact on places like Gauteng with mass, there are lots of arms and ammunition dealers, lots of hunting goes on, the private security industry will be affected. It is massive. So the bill has, the DA has run a big campaign. The comments were submitted by Monday this week. All comments had to be submitted to the Civilian Secretariat. Any objections or anyone who's supporting the bill, not many people supporting the bill, I'm pleased to say. But that bill is now going back to Cabinet, hopefully with all the comments, and they will see for themselves that this is not worth bringing back down to Parliament. So it hasn't come to Parliament yet. It's still going to come to Parliament. And if it does come to Parliament, we'll continue to fight it, and it will go out on public participation. And people will see me at every one of those meetings, because we really need to be present. We need to be vigilant. And as they say, what is the price of freedom? Well, it's eternal vigilance, right? We've got to make sure that everybody is really hyper aware of what's going on. And I'm so proud of our party for really championing this fight and making sure that the DA made our voice very clear, very loud, and galvanized public support around opposing this bill for all of the right reasons. We believe that there are constitutional issues with the bill, and I don't think that ultimately this bill will succeed. But we cannot take our foot off the accelerator. We have to fight it with everything we have. And I would call on members of the public, if I can use this platform, to really get behind it and keep voicing their concerns.
Absolutely, Andrew, and thank you so much for all the work that you continue to do on behalf of so many South Africans who are honestly pinning their hopes on you and on the work that you do in Parliament. I think there, when you stand as sometimes only one man saying things, or as a cohort of only a few police-related DA parliamentarians, I think you have to know that you are not alone, and there are millions of people standing with you, supporting the very same issues, such as fighting this firearms control amendment bill. We now have one question for you from a member of our audience on the platform with us.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Michael, for the opportunity. A lot of residents in KZN who were seen bearing firearms and rifles to protect their neighborhood have received a lot of criticism from members of the public and those who are still advocating for stricter gun laws. Why was it so important for residents during the unrest to have their guns with them?
Well, it's a great question, and I think that we've got to be very careful. I believe that South Africans should have the option or the choice to own a firearm for the purposes of self-defense. The self-defense doesn't mean that you can fire your firearm into a crowd because you feel unsafe in your property. The criteria for self-defense are quite strict and stringent, and a court of law would apply those very, very strictly. Otherwise, we'd have anarchy in South Africa with people just pulling off, shots wherever they want. So it's not just a case of having a gun and there being no conditions to how you can use it for self-defense. There are very strict conditions, and we must remind people of that. But the important thing about having those firearms, having the ability to protect yourself, is if a protest or a riot got out of hand and the South African Police Service was nowhere to be seen and there was nobody to protect you, and people came onto your property and you felt that your life was being immediately threatened, then you would have the opportunity to make use of that firearm to defend yourself, your family, and your property against any invaders who were threatening your life. And I think that's the most important thing. The other thing is the knowledge that a community possesses firearms can act as a deterrent for criminals who think they can come and take an opportunity. I would feel safer at night knowing that I had a law-abiding, responsible citizen who I could trust as my neighbor who owned a firearm, for example. Not many people have access to private security, and most people don't have access to the South African Police Service for the reasons we've discussed. So the last line of defense for many individuals and their communities are their firearms. But we must stress the point that firearms must be used responsibly and within the law. You have the right to self-defense, and it must be respected and protected. But we must make sure that we understand what self-defense really means, so that we don't find ourselves on the wrong side of the law, like some people have over time across the world. We need to be very, very clear about what the provisions of self-defense are and how to go about exercising that, protecting that right in a responsible and legal manner.
Thanks once again, Andrew, for coming onto the show. We thank you for continuing the right to protect the rights of citizens to own a firearm for self-defense. It's like you said before, a firearm is a citizen's last line of defense, and it would be insanity to take that away from them. Our final guest coming up is the Minister of Community Safety in the Western Cape, Albert Fritz, who will have a discussion with us on how good governance helped the Western Cape government prepare and prevent any unrest and looting in the province. Our final guest tonight has led some incredible initiatives in the Western Cape to help make residents feel a lot safer. While national government has failed in fulfilling their mandate, the DA-led Western Cape, under the guidance of Provincial Community Safety Minister Albert Fritz, has taken charge in clamping down on crime. Minister, thank you for joining us tonight and welcome to the summit.
Thank you, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be with all of you. So, Michael, we started off and we really had to work and focus on developing a response to what was happening in KZN and in Gauteng. And I'm going to share some of our what we did with the audience tonight and how people really find this very, very, very helpful and, just enjoy the content. So if you can just change to the next one. So the first approach we had was an integrated multidisciplinary approach, and we made sure that that was in place. We and specifically to address any incident of public violence, unrest, looting, taxi violence, any other crime, and we used our intelligence operations, our visible policing detection, our detection methodology, our involvement of the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigations, the Hawks, our Metro Police for the City of Cape Town, our traffic, our law enforcement, and our disaster management. All those entities worked in a collaborative way together. The second important part of the strategy was that this strategy was driven and monitored by the provincial cabinet, led by the Premier Alan Winde, and then myself as the Community Safety MSc in the Western Cape. And we met daily at 7:30 to check in and agree on the plan of action going forward. On the next slide. So we also used, colleagues, the operational approach that we specifically used was the 5-pillar approach. The first one was the intelligence collection and intelligence gathering and the analysis and coordination of that. The second pillar was the proactive policing pillar. Third pillar was the combat and reaction approach. The fourth one was the investigation that we had to conduct and really find out who were the culprits. And the last was a proper communication system and model. Next slide. So the crime prevention and high visibility pillar consisted of proactive visible policing actions, and it inter alia involved visiting of all our malls in our province, liaison with mall management, the really interaction with them. They were our partners, they became our partners. Visible patrols in and around malls, visible patrols on primary and secondary routes, visiting of national key points, that was a very important one, vehicle checkpoints on predetermined routes, and this proved to be the most effective method that we used, because no one knew where the roadblocks and where the visible policing checkpoints and vehicle checkpoint would be. Visiting of petrol stations, monitoring of taxi ranks, because remember in this province, the taxis are really a big problem to us. Monitoring of our reservoirs, monitoring of the Kubik power station and all other stations. The monitoring of distribution centers, because we have seen in specifically Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, those were the targets. They targeted those distribution centers. Monitoring of ports of entry, the monitoring of routes identified as for possible attacks on trucks, and this is an incredibly important one, that we had to do and monitor. Monitoring of our courts and prisons, visits to spaza shops, arrest of suspects. We arrested them. We thought they were anyway involved. Confiscation of firearms and illegal firearms specifically. I promise you, we have over that period really confiscated a whole lot of illegal firearms. And of course, confiscation of all other dangerous weapons, confiscation of stolen items, confiscation of business, burglary, implements, people walking or trying to, we stopped it. You didn't even get near a factory with your implements. And of course, the importance of protecting the crime scenes and exhibits. Next slide. So the communication liaison was also a very important one. So we had a proactive communication plan. We monitored all social media platforms because it's on those platforms that one can really pick up a whole lot of information. Quick time verification of incidents trending on social media, and counter-reporting. We counter-reported. We had to say this is not true. We had to release information to our citizens, management of public perceptions, media liaisons, and we had a very good interaction with the media, attending to media inquiries immediately. When you got an inquiry, immediately responded, marketing of successes. And we had to say to people, this is what we are doing and this is how good it is, and so that people could feel comfortable. And of course, marketing our extortion hotline and the marketing of all our call centers. Next slide. And so the SAPS deployment specifically consisted of a public order policing capacity of Cape Town, Boland, and Southern Cape. Now you must remember, this national government also had a number of our public order police officers redeployed to KwaZulu-Natal. I must just make that point. So we sat with very limited POP officers. Tactical response teams were deployed. Detached forces from Operation Lockdown 2. It's a very important point because they didn't become available. Boots on the ground. Visible policing teams from all the stations and clusters. Our station detectives, our flying squad, our K9 units, which are the dog units, our provincial integrated task team, SAPS air wing, SAPS call centers were absolutely deployed to full capacity. Mounted units, that's a very, very important one in specifically these kind of issues. Our crime intelligence, hostage negotiators, our special task force, and they were all on standby all the time. Flash and our provincial detectives. Next slide. And so that the next deployment sector was from our own DA-run city of Cape Town. And in that, there we had a lot of control. So we had our Metro Police that assisted, and we will show you now how they all fell under a central control. We had the law enforcement, which is funded mainly by us. We have our traffic, the city traffic police, and we had our LEAP officers who are also the law enforcement component of the city. Our next slide. And from a provincial traffic, remember the traffic, we have the one force that we have as a province is the traffic force. And so the provincial traffic, they called all officers from rest days to bolster the numbers during that critical week, when officers were, to make officers available for deployment. We also had to focus, and we had to focus, and we will continue to focus on monitoring main transport routes as well as truck stops. Provincial traffic will increase presence along the R300 and the N7. Those are our two main problem areas, but also the N1 and the N2, and specifically monitoring our distribution centers on those routes. The R300 has the most distribution centers. So it's an important point. Our provincial traffic also worked with SAPS and was guided by the provincial and cluster operation command center within regions regarding deployment requirements. So it was all part of a centralized and coordinated operation center. Next slide. And so this graphically illustrates the point I just made now. So you have your operational approach and coordination. We have a joint operation center that's still running. It's called the Transport Management Center. And you will notice that you had traffic police, you had the Cape Town traffic, law enforcement, you had Metro Police, you had emergency medical services, Department of Education is even involved there because we have children, school children who are vulnerable. We have accredited neighborhood watchers in our Transport Management Center. We had the South African Police, who's an important role player in there, and all the private security, organizations and companies all involved included. Then they all linked, and I think this is an important point, they all linked to a bigger operational center. They also linked to the Disaster Risk Management Center. They're linked to the Fire Emergency Operations Center, linked to the Freeway Management System. It's important to understand this. Linked to my City Bus company and the Golden Arrow Bus companies, and they also linked to the EPICS, system that the City of Cape Town used to do a whole lot of planning and information gathering. And all of them either conducted joint operations, and those are operations conducted with external stakeholders such as SAPS. Now remember, from a provincial traffic and a provincial government point of view, SAPS is an external stakeholder, or an integrated operations conducted between Metro Police, traffic services, and law enforcement. Or the last one is on autonomous operations conducted within individual services and specialized units. And I think it's important to note, but all information eventually went into our joint operations center. Next slide. And so let me just very quickly talk about the proactive and preventative measures in place. And it's still in place because we just come out of a whole taxi violence story. So daily ProfJobCom meetings are still held. Daily high-level check-ins with the South African Police Service, the City of Cape Town, the Department of Community Safety, Department of Transport, and the provincial Premier's office. I think it's important. The ongoing stakeholder engagement with taxi industry representatives, with the Golden Arrow bus companies and other relevant role players. We also had official feedback and updates on public unrest and transport operations on the Western Cape and the City of Cape Town social media platforms, including digicons with senior provincial leadership from the Western Cape government and SAPS to keep the public informed and updated. I think it's an important point all the time to communicate with the public. The activation of community-based safety partners to provide reliable information became very, very important. Our WhatsApp groups with various key role players to share and verify real-time information. The deployment of security support teams when required, and that was basically run by Department of Community Safety. The activation of our court watching briefs to monitor cases in court because we want to see convictions. And the last one was SAPS, Metro Police, Traffic, South African National Defence Force, and law enforcement policing routes. And they all policed the routes to ensure that commuters get home safely. And specifically during the last week of taxi violence, that became seriously important to our citizens of this province. Our next one. And so what were the best practices that we learned from all of this? So the one was that good working relations between the three spheres of government is critical towards achieving safety in a province. The second one was that the investment made in building a trust relationship with SAPS and other structures, including our neighborhood watches, our CPFs, and our faith-based organizations, meant that a consolidated, integrated plan of action could be developed in a very short space of time. Thirdly, that having a clear command structure in place. We must have a clear coordinated command structure in place. Meant that all operations were effectively coordinated and executed. The next point was that the communication strategy and the communication with all relevant stakeholders are key. We have a number of digicons and engagements, among others, with we had all our council generals with us, where we gave them information, the business community, the faith-based community, a number of our stakeholders within the province. And the last point, that community members will mobilize themselves in a time of crisis to support government. And we have seen our ordinary community members, of course, under the sphere of the Neighborhood Watch program, organized to protect, shops and malls and all of those factories. So I think on that point, I want to say thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you so much, Minister. Honestly, I know from engaging with other MECs there in the Western Cape, you are all servant leaders. You work on Christmas Day. You work at midnight on New Year's. You work on the 1st of January. You work on the 31st of December.
Yeah.
And I know that you are servant leaders by nature, but I will maintain it's not for you to thank us for our being here. It's really an incredible privilege to have you on and to be able to learn from you. One of the things that I did note from your presentation, which I think was severely lacking here in the province of Gauteng, is ongoing communication. Our residents were left in the dark by our MEC, by our provincial police commissioner, as to things like, is the violent unrest going to spring up again? What kind of action is being taken to prevent unrest in future? And people just wanted to know basic information like, where are there violent hotspots? And if there were places that maybe had encountered violence, if they're no longer experiencing violence, so they know whether their own jobs and their own families and loved ones can feel safe, even where they reside themselves. Which really brings me on to a very pertinent point, Minister, as yes, we are both in the DA, but I would hope that an alien in space could see honestly that what the DA does in the Western Cape could benefit South Africa.
Yeah.
And moving on from there, Minister, the DA in Gauteng is currently proposing a community safety oversight bill, which emulates the practice in the Western Cape of a provincial police ombudsman, of an advisory committee to the NEC, and accreditation of neighborhood watches. How have these mechanisms improved safety in the Cape? And can you see the state of safety in Gauteng improving if the bill is adopted?
Let me just start with the ombudsman. The police ombudsman is like one of the best mechanisms that we have created within this province to assist frustrated citizens with an inefficient police service. And remember, we have a lot of cooperation now. We have a very good man who's appointed as a provincial commissioner, General Patekile. But I must say, there are still those holes of inefficiency, of police inefficiency. And the ombudsman has been doing an amazing job and a very, very good job in correcting a lot of those. And so people now know they can go somewhere to complain and to really lay, and even if they write to me, I assist them to get through the process of dealing with the ombudsman. The second point you raised was the issue of also looking at how the accreditation of neighborhood watches. It just makes sense. The accreditation of neighborhood watches, so you don't have rogue, vigilantes on the road with, stickers saying neighborhood watch, but no one knows who. It may be a bunch of criminals, maybe all of that. So we do proper vetting. We also support those neighborhood watches with funding to buy equipment like torches, etc. So I think that part was absolutely important. Then the third point of the Provincial Safety Advisory Committee, consisting of a judge, consisting of one of our professors, a top criminologist professor. There's a lady who's now from the NGO sector, but is also a top researcher in community policing and policing. And then the last fourth person is from corporate South Africa, is from the corporate world. And today we met for 3 hours. And I tell you, and we were talking about exactly the taxi violence, or there are no consequences. Where immediately the judge on our panel immediately said, no, listen, he will follow this up with the MPA. That kind of immediate responses to issues that we have. We find a very low conviction rate among taxi violence. So again, that came up on the agenda. They also look at how businesses can assist in becoming a partner in community safety. During the almost this kind of threat of looting in the Western Cape, businesses became a fundamental partner. Our communities they all became very, very important partners. So I think the whole idea of this advisory committee consisting of civil society, academics, the academia, the judiciary, corporate world. Is just an amazing model. And I've today experienced that. It's just great to have them. It just really helps.
Thank you so much, Minister. Honestly, I feel inspired and like I'm learning at your feet as you address us. I think honestly we heard from Andrew Whitfield earlier that SAPS is laying the blame on not having sufficient intelligence when it comes to failing to contain the violence in KZN and in the province of Gauteng. But I think initiatives there in the Western Cape, simple, well, it seems so simple to us, but simple solutions such as that advisory committee from all segments of society, surely it helps you to obtain information on an ongoing basis across society. Minister, following on from that, what would you suggest be done in Gauteng to prevent further unrest, to raise accountability of the SAPS, and to increase resources for our province?
I think the first thing must be, and this was what we did, there must be political will. There must be a political will. In this province, I think many people say thank you to God that we have a DA government in this province. Because this DA government took charge under the leadership of Premier Alan Winde and really took the whole, not the security people on the cabinet. Every single minister of cabinet had to come at 7:30. Had to get online at 7:30. And we met before that, myself and the Premier and Minister Dylan Mitchell, the youngest member, I think, in the country at the moment. He had to, we met at 7 before with our police, so that we could, say what was happening, so we can give a proper report back to this whole. There must be political will. That's the first thing. You must have, and people must vote out. I'm sorry to say this, but they must really vote out the ANC. In many parts here in the Western Cape, they're completely irrelevant, because what we actually need, as I said, those political will. Then you must have a non-politicized police entity. The police can't be politicized, that like what we've seen here in the Western Cape at some point, where the police are bigger comrades than trying to solve the crime problem. So that's now, luckily, we have a very good man who's a professional police officer, and he sticks to being a professional police officer, because that's fundamental. And then thirdly, the systems of civil society. Civil society gives you the best information. And I can tell you, all that intelligence I spoke about was from mainly civil society, and it got distilled by the official intelligence, entities. But it came through our neighborhood watches, our CPFs, Community Police Forum, our farmers watches, the farm watches, the civic associations, the religious organizations, the churches, the pastors. They are on the ground, and they were the people feeding us all that intelligence, and therefore we could always preempt any attack, preempt a step, and be a step ahead of whoever's trying to attack any kind of more. And so I think all those components, political will together with a proper professional police service, with an amazing civil society formations, all of them, civil just getting in, and as you say, accredited, civil society formations, all of them make the kind of whole to get and to make sure that we get proper information, that we can prevent. It's no use you wait for the thing to happen like what happened in KZN. You can't wait. You must be, preventative. You must be able to scenario plan and see what's possibly going to happen. Otherwise, you'll sit as what happened now. I see the president is going to fire a couple of them, but you can't. We must do preventative work. You must do scenario planning to really be ahead of anyone else and always be in charge of the space that you need to protect. I think that's an important part.
Absolutely. Minister, thank you so very much for coming onto tonight's show. It is always an inspiration to learn what DA good governance does for residents where we govern. It is tangible proof that if given the chance, the DA can really make that positive difference in many other parts of South Africa.
Thank you, Michael. It's always great to also share with our colleagues. And I'm sure we all, not one day, soon, we will all be in the Western Cape's position where DA will show how to run a country and how to govern provinces properly without stealing the money. So thank you to all your colleagues on that side, to the technical people. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I am now joined by my colleague in the Gauteng legislature and DA Gauteng spokesperson for community safety, Krozan Bosch, to list some of the solutions and resolutions that we have formulated from tonight's summit and which the DA will be pushing for going forward. Krozan, let's have a look at those resolutions.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to all the viewers who have joined us tonight for this informative and helpful summit. South Africans and residents of Gauteng are much stronger together when we are united and dedicated to make our communities more safe. Michael, there have been a couple of resolutions put together from tonight's summit that the DA will be pursuing going forward, and that most importantly includes continuing to advocate for the adoption of our Community Safety Oversight Bill. This bill is important because it provides directives for the establishment of community policing forums and boards, while also providing accreditation of organizations and associations such as neighborhood watch groups, as well as catering for partnerships with the community organizations. This bill would also establish the Office of the Gauteng Provincial Police Ombudsman that will be tasked with investigating any complaints regarding the police. The bill would also establish an advisory committee that fosters greater intelligence to the MEC by roping in all sectors of society, including legal, NGOs, businesses, and security companies. Overall, this bill will really ensure that security services are more coordinated within the province and can therefore be more responsive to incidents of crime. We will continue to call for the Gauteng Traffic Police to be declared an essential 24-hour service for the monitoring of Gauteng roads. Gauteng motorists really do have a credible fear of driving at night, with many cases of hijackings and road spikes in the past. More police visibility at night can really assist in curbing these crimes. As we have seen in the DA municipalities, local government is very capable of supplementing the law enforcement efforts of SAPS through various safety services. However, municipal budgeting for these services can only go so far, which is why we will start calling on the Provincial Department of Community Safety to initiate additional funding for metro and local municipalities for the purpose of local law enforcement services. This can go a long way in easing the pressure of SAPS so that they can focus on other crimes. Lastly, the DA will not give up the fight against the current Firearms Control Amendment Bill. South Africans, especially those living in rural areas, rely on gun ownership to protect themselves when SAPS are nowhere to be seen. Citizens must have the right to adequately defend themselves when their lives are being threatened. Michael, these are the resolutions that I think we should champion in the legislature going forward. And as we get to the end of tonight's program, I really just want to thank yourself, Michael, for leading this summit, and to all our guest speakers and reviewers for watching and coming to the show. And I just want to thank all of you for participating, and let us work together to grow Gauteng and make it a safer community for all. Thank you very much.